My name is Charlotte Davis. I am 39 years old. At our family anniversary party, my mother declared my fiancé was a dead end, and they had already lined up a superior match for me. My father and older sister said nothing as guests stared. The public dismissal in front of everyone shattered me instantly. Standing there with forced calm, I decided to let them believe I was still the naive low earner they pitied. But that single quiet choice was about to unleash a reckoning none of them could escape. I had arrived at the country club that warm Boston evening, dressed exactly as they expected. Simple navy dress, modest flats. No flashy jewelry, my 12-year-old Subaru parked among the luxury cars, like an unwelcome guest. For 14 months, I had kept my real life hidden from the people who should have known me best. I never lied outright. When they asked what I did, I said I worked in tech. They assumed administrative assistant, barely scraping by in a tiny apartment. I smiled and let them fill in the blanks. Why? Because my late grandmother had drilled one truth into me since I was a child. A person's real character shows only when they think you have nothing left to give. She had lived simply despite millions in the bank, and her letter after she passed reminded me that true worth reveals itself in the quiet moments when no one important is watching. So when my family started pushing this engagement celebration as the perfect time to secure my future, I chose to test them the same way. I would show up as the struggling daughter they pitied and watch exactly how they treated someone they believed could offer them zero advantage. The party was in full swing under the white tents on the manicured lawn. String lights twinkled, waiters circled with champagne, and the whole extended circle of Boston business families had turned out. My fiancé, Ryan Ellis, stood beside me, looking proud but slightly out of place in his off-the-rack suit. He worked as a marketing coordinator for a mid-sized firm downtown steady, but nothing flashy, and that was all my family needed to see. My mother, Nancy Davis, spotted us the moment we stepped under the tent. She swept over in her designer cream gown diamonds, catching every light, and pulled me into a hug that felt more like a performance than affection. "Charlotte, darling, you made it," she said loud enough for the nearest group to hear. Then her eyes flicked to Ryan and her smile tightened. "And you brought your friend." How sweet. That single word landed like a slap. Friend. Not fiancé. Not even boyfriend. Just friend. My father, Thomas Davis, shook Ryan's hand with the kind of grip that said he was already calculating how little this man could contribute. My older sister, Abigail Green, drifted over next, her laugh too bright, her diamonds dripping heavier than usual. "Nice dress, sis. Vintage, right? So practical for someone on a budget." She said it with that fake sweetness she'd perfected over the years, the one that always made me feel 10 years old again. Ryan squeezed my hand, but he stayed quiet the way he always did around them. I filed that away too. I smiled through it all, playing the grateful daughter who was lucky to be included. Inside, though, every jab sharpened my resolve. They had no idea I made $37,000 a month before taxes as a senior software architect at one of Boston's top tech firms. Patents, stock options, international speaking gigs, none of it existed in their version of me. And that was exactly how I wanted it tonight. The evening wore on with the usual rounds of toasts and small talk. My mother steered the conversation toward family alliances and smart matches that strengthened the business. Our family owned a chain of mid-range car dealerships that had been struggling since the last recession. Everyone knew it, even if no one said it out loud. Then she dropped the name Brooke Lang like it was casual conversation. "You remember Brooke, don't you, Charlotte? Her family's luxury import company would be such a perfect fit for us right now. Their distribution network could save everything." The implication hung there. Ryan could never offer that. I was supposed to understand. I excused myself to find the restroom, heart pounding, needing a moment to breathe. As I passed a half-open side door leading to the private lounge, I heard voices I recognized all too well. My mother and my older sister. I stopped in the shadows, every instinct screaming to keep walking, but something in my mother's tone pinned me in place. Can't let this continue," my mother was saying, voice low and urgent. "Ryan is a nice boy, but he's a nobody. Charlotte thinks she's in love, but she's always been the dreamer in the family. We need the Lang merger signed within the month, or the dealerships go under. Abigail, you have to help me convince her tonight." My older sister laughed softly. "She's so naive, Mom. She actually believes we're happy for her. I already started spreading a few quiet concerns about Ryan's stability to the right people at his company. By next week, he'll be too busy defending his job to worry about rings and weddings. My blood turned to ice. This wasn't just snobbery. This was calculated destruction. They were actively trying to ruin Ryan's career to force me toward Brooke Lang's brother and the business deal that would save their empire. I stood there frozen, the party music faint in the background, realizing the people who were supposed to love me most saw me as nothing more than a bargaining chip. I slipped away before they noticed splashed cold water on my face and stared at my reflection. The woman looking back wasn't broken. She was calculating. I had come here to learn who they really were when they thought I had nothing to offer, and they had just handed me the proof on a silver platter. But walking away now would be too easy. They would spin it as me being dramatic. No. If I was going to respond, it would be on my terms. When I returned to the main tent, my mother was already steering Ryan toward the stage for the official engagement toast. She beamed at the crowd. We couldn't be more thrilled for Charlotte and her choice. The pause was deliberate. Then she added, "Of course, we always hoped for a union that would bring even more strength to the family business. But love is love, right?" Polite laughter rippled through the guests. Ryan shifted uncomfortably beside me. I felt Cousin Zoe Walker watching from the side table, her eyes wide with quiet concern. She had always been the one relative who saw through the polish, but even she stayed silent for now. Uncle Paul Walker caught my eye from across the room. He was my father's old business partner, the one my family had quietly pushed out years ago over a shady deal. His expression was unreadable, but something in it told me he recognized the game being played. I gave him the smallest nod. Maybe I wasn't completely alone after all. The rest of the night blurred into more passive jabs and strategic seating that kept Ryan and me separated from the important conversations. By the time we finally left, Ryan was quiet in the passenger seat of my old car. "They really don't like me much, do they?" he asked softly. I wanted to tell him everything I had overheard, but not yet. Instead, I squeezed his hand and said, "They just don't know you." Inside, though the plan was already forming, I would play the happy fiancé for a few more weeks. I would smile through every family dinner and business brunch, and I would gather every piece of evidence I needed to show my family exactly who they had underestimated. The next morning, I started digging. My job had taught me how to uncover hidden patterns in complex systems, and now I turned those skills on the people who raised me. What I found confirmed every whispered word from the night before. The dealerships were drowning in debt from reckless expansion. The Lang family merger wasn't just convenient, it was survival. And my older sister Abigail had been quietly siphoning funds for years, small at first, then larger, all hidden in expense accounts and fake vendor payments. Hundreds of thousands of dollars funneled into her lifestyle while the company bled. I printed everything: bank records, transaction logs, even emails I never should have been able to access. Then I reached out to Uncle Paul Walker. He met me at a quiet cafe downtown, eyes sharp behind his glasses. "I always knew they'd push too far one day," he said. "They did the same thing to me 15 years ago. If you need someone who understands how their books really work, I'm in." Cousin Zoe Walker texted me later that same afternoon, worried after seeing how the party had gone. "I heard things I shouldn't have," she wrote. "Be careful, Charlotte. They're already talking about how to guide you toward the right decision." Her message gave me the last piece of courage I needed. For the next 3 weeks, I performed perfectly. I attended every family event wearing the modest clothes they expected. I let my mother introduce me as our Charlotte, who works in tech support while she steered conversations toward Brooke Lang's brother and the wonderful opportunities he represented. Ryan grew more distant, sensing the pressure but not understanding its depth. Each time he asked if everything was okay, I smiled and said yes, even as the weight of what I knew pressed harder. Then came the night everything shifted. My mother called a special family dinner at the estate to finalize plans for the future. I knew what that meant. Ryan was invited, but so was Brooke Lang's brother and their father. The trap was closing. I arrived in my usual simple outfit, heart steady for the first time in weeks. Uncle Paul and Cousin Zoe had both agreed to be there as supportive relatives, though only I knew their real purpose. As we sat down to dinner, my mother raised her glass with that familiar frozen smile. To new beginnings and the matches that truly strengthen our family. she said, eyes sliding pointedly toward Brooke's brother. Then she turned to me. Charlotte, we all want what's best for you. Don't you agree? It's time to think practically. The table went quiet. Ryan's hand found mine under the table, but I could feel him trembling. In that moment, I realized the full cost of the game I had started. My family wasn't just testing me. They were willing to destroy the man I loved to protect their empire. And I was about to find out whether I had the strength to stop them without losing everything that mattered. The dinner table felt heavier than the crystal glasses and silverware could explain. My mother raised her glass higher, her smile never quite reaching her eyes as she looked straight at Ryan. To new beginnings and the matches that truly strengthen our family, she repeated, her voice carrying that polished edge everyone at the table recognized as a warning. Then she turned to me, eyes narrowing just enough. Charlotte, we all want what's best for you. Don't you agree it's time to think practically? Brooke Lang's brother is here tonight after all. Their import network could save the dealerships we've poured our lives into. A girl like you should understand loyalty to family over whatever this is. The words landed like a quiet slap, but the real sting came from how casually she said them, as if Ryan were invisible. My father cleared his throat, but stayed silent, staring at his plate. My older sister leaned forward with that familiar smirk. Oh, come on, Moms, just being honest. Ryan seems nice and all, but let's face it, sis. Your little tech support job isn't exactly building empires. We need alliances that matter, not someone who can barely afford a decent suit. Ryan's hand tightened around mine under the table, his knuckles white. I could feel him shrinking beside me, the same way he always did when my family turned their attention his direction. I wanted to stand up right there and tell them everything I had uncovered about the dealership debts and my older sister's secret withdrawals, but I held back. That would have been too quick, too clean. They still thought I was the same struggling daughter they had always pitied, and that underestimation was my only real weapon now. Uncle Paul Walker, who had been quietly sipping his wine across from us, set his glass down with a deliberate clink. Nancy, perhaps we should let Charlotte speak for herself, he said, voice calm, but carrying real weight. He had always been the one relative who refused to play along with the family games, ever since my parents had squeezed him out of that old partnership years ago. I've seen what happens when people force these so-called practical matches. Sometimes the numbers don't add up the way you expect. My mother shot him a look that could have frozen the entire room. This isn't your concern, Paul. We're talking about our daughter's future here. But Uncle Paul didn't back down. He glanced at me with a small nod, the kind that said he remembered our cafe conversation and was ready if I needed him. Cousin Zoe Walker, seated beside him, caught my eye too. She had slipped me a quick text earlier that afternoon, warning that my older sister had already made calls to Ryan's company, planting doubts about his commitment and stability. Now she leaned in close enough for only me to hear. Charlotte, I overheard her on the phone this morning. She told his boss he was distracted by personal drama. If you don't do something soon, he could lose that promotion he's been chasing for months. The words hit me like ice water. My older sister had already started the sabotage I had only suspected. This wasn't just dinner talk anymore. The machine was moving faster than I had planned. I kept my face neutral, smiling as if we were discussing the weather, but inside the anger was sharpening into something cold and precise. I had spent the last 3 weeks gathering every financial record, every suspicious transfer, every email trail that proved the dealerships were one bad quarter from collapse and that my older sister had been skimming to fund her own lifestyle. Uncle Paul had quietly confirmed the worst of it with old contacts who still owed him favors. But revealing it all now would blow up everything, including Ryan's career, if my family decided to retaliate. Ryan finally spoke, his voice steady but strained. I appreciate your concern, Mrs. Davis, but Charlotte and I are building something real. We don't need outside alliances to make that work. My mother laughed softly, the sound laced with pity. That's very sweet, Ryan. Really? But Charlotte has always needed guidance. She's 39 now, not some wide-eyed girl who can afford to wait for love to pay the bills. We've seen how these things end when people ignore practical realities. The table shifted uncomfortably. Guests at the far end were starting to notice the tension forks pausing mid-air. My father finally muttered something about letting the young people decide, but it was too little too late. My older sister jumped in again, her tone dripping with false concern. Exactly. I mean, look at how hard you work just to keep up, Charlotte. That old car of yours, the tiny apartment. It must be exhausting. Brooke's brother could change all that overnight. Why fight it? I felt Ryan pull his hand away slightly, the doubt creeping in exactly as my family had intended. That was the first real crack I had seen in him all evening, and it terrified me more than any of their insults. Uncle Paul caught the moment and leaned forward. Charlotte, I've reviewed some of the dealership projections lately through old channels. Things aren't as stable as everyone claims. Forcing a marriage into that mess might not save anything. It could just drag more people down. Cousin Zoe nodded beside him, her eyes meeting mine with quiet urgency. He's right. And I hate to say it, but some of those expense reports, they don't line up. If anyone digs deeper, it could get ugly for everyone involved. Her words were vague enough for the table, but crystal clear to me. She had seen the same embezzlement trails I had uncovered. My mother's face tightened for the briefest second before she recovered with another polished smile. Enough of this unpleasant talk. We're here to celebrate, not dredge up old business nonsense. But the damage was done. The air had shifted, and I could see the first hints of uncertainty in my father's eyes. Still, my mother wasn't finished. She raised her glass again this time, directly toward Brooke Lang's brother at the far end of the table. To the kind of partnerships that actually build legacies. Charlotte, darling, you'll thank us one day for steering you right. The implication hung there, like smoke choose Brooke's brother, or watch Ryan suffer the consequences. I sat there feeling the weight of every choice I had made in the last few weeks, the careful performance, the hidden files, the late-night calls with Uncle Paul and Cousin Zoe. Part of me wanted to stand up right then and to lay everything bare, the debts, the stolen money, the calculated plan to use me as a bridge to the Lang family. But another part, the quieter, stronger part, knew that timing mattered more than satisfaction. If I exposed them now, my older sister would spin it as jealousy. My mother would claim I was unstable, and Ryan might still lose his job in the crossfire. No, I needed one more piece, one final confirmation before I made my move. The dessert course arrived, but no one touched it. Conversations around us had quieted the guests, sensing the storm brewing at our table. Ryan turned to me, voice low. Charlotte, maybe we should talk about this later. Alone. His eyes held a question I wasn't ready to answer yet, and in that moment, I realized the game had already cost more than I had calculated. My mother watched us with that satisfied little smile, certain she had won another round. Uncle Paul caught my gaze again and gave the smallest shake of his head a silent warning not to push too far tonight. Cousin Zoe slipped her phone under the table and showed me a single text she had just received from a mutual contact. Ryan's boss had scheduled an emergency meeting with him first thing tomorrow morning to discuss commitment issues. The sabotage was real, and it was moving faster than even I had anticipated. I took a slow breath, forcing my hands to stay steady on the tablecloth. The decision crystallized in that instant. I would not let them destroy him to save their empire. But I also knew that fighting back openly might mean losing the only family I had ever known, and possibly the man I loved if the pressure proved too much for him. The question now wasn't whether I would act. It was whether I could do it without breaking everything I still cared about in the process. Because as the evening wound down, and my mother began steering everyone toward the lounge for after-dinner drinks, I realized the real test was just beginning. One wrong word tonight, and the entire careful plan I had built would collapse, leaving me with nothing but the hollow victory of being right. And I wasn't sure I was ready for what that kind of right would cost me. The lounge was quieter than the main tent, the fireplace crackling softly as guests settled into leather armchairs, with after-dinner drinks in hand. My mother guided Damien Lang straight to my side, her hand resting lightly on his arm, like he was already part of the family portrait. "Charlotte, you remember Damien?" She said, her voice warm for him and cool for me. "His family's import business is exactly what we need right now. Think of the stability it would bring, not just for the dealerships, but for all of us. You've always been the practical one deep down, haven't you?" Damien smiled politely, tall and polished in his tailored suit. But I could see the calculation in his eyes, too. He was here for the deal, not for me. My older sister Abigail slid in next to him, her laugh too sharp. "Damien's been telling me all about their new distribution lines." "Ryan, no offense, But your marketing job sounds cute compared to real business moves like this. Charlotte deserves someone who can actually elevate her, don't you think? Ryan shifted beside me, his face pale under the low lights. I felt the ground tilting, the sabotage Zoe had warned me about now playing out in real time. Before I could respond, my father cleared his throat from his chair by the fire. Nancy's right, Charlotte. We've poured decades into this company. A match like this isn't about romance. It's about survival. His words landed heavy, but they were the first real support he had shown her all night, and that silence from earlier at the table suddenly felt like agreement. Uncle Paul Walker stood slowly, his presence steadying the room. Thomas, you and I both know the books don't lie. The expansion loans are underwater, and those expense reports Abigail filed last quarter, they don't add up. I've seen the transfers. Hundreds of thousands funneled out while the company bled. He looked straight at my mother. You've been pushing Charlotte into this corner because you think she has no choice. But maybe it's time everyone saw the full picture. Cousin Zoe Walker pulled a slim folder from her bag and slid it across the low table toward me, her eyes urgent. Charlotte. I double-checked with Elena Vargas, the attorney who handled the last audit. She confirmed the discrepancies this afternoon. It's all here. If the Langs see this before signing, the merger could still happen, but not on your family's terms. Elena Vargas, the sharp-eyed family attorney who had been invited as a neutral guest, stepped forward from the edge of the group. She had always stayed professional, but tonight, her voice cut through. I reviewed the documents you sent me, Charlotte. The patterns are clear. This isn't just poor management. It's deliberate. And Thomas, you signed off on several of those questionable transfers yourself. You knew. My father's face drained of color, but he didn't deny it. Instead, he looked at me with something close to resignation. Sometimes you do what you have to for the family, Charlotte. You wouldn't understand. My mother's smile faltered for the first time, but she recovered fast, turning on me with a venom I had never heard so openly. This is how you repay us. Bringing old grudges and half-baked accusations to ruin everything we've built. After everything we've done for you, letting you play at your little tech support job while we carried the real weight, you're still that same ungrateful girl who never quite fit. The room had gone completely still. Guests nearby set down their glasses. Damian Lang shifted uncomfortably, his interest in the merger suddenly complicated. Ryan looked from me to my family, his expression cracking under the weight of it all. Charlotte, is this true? You knew about all this and didn't tell me. His voice was quiet, but the hurt in it sliced deeper than any of my mother's words. I pulled the folder open right there, laying out the printed statements and Elena's notes for anyone close enough to see. I didn't hide it to hurt you, Ryan. I hid who I really was because I needed to know who they were when they thought I had nothing to offer. My job isn't tech support. I'm a senior software architect earning $37,000 a month. I have patent stock options and the ability to walk away from all of this tomorrow. But I stayed because I loved you, and I hoped my family would show me something real. I turned to my mother. You called me common. You planned to sabotage Ryan's job to force my hand. You let Abigail steal from the company while pretending everything was fine. And Dad, you enabled it. I gave you every chance to choose differently. My older sister laughed bitterly, but it sounded forced. Oh, please, Charlotte. You're just bitter because no one ever picked you first. Damian, don't let her twist this. The Langs still get the deal if we move forward tonight. But Damian was already stepping back, murmuring something about needing to consult his father. Ryan pulled me aside near the fireplace, his hands shaking. I can't do this, Charlotte. Your family. They're tearing my career apart already. My boss called me this morning about commitment issues your sister planted. If I stay, I lose everything I've worked for. I love you, but I can't fight them and keep my life together. His eyes filled with regret as he let go of my hand. Maybe they're right. Maybe I'm not the one who can give you what you need. The words broke something inside me I didn't know was still whole. I wanted to argue to show him the real me, the one who could have bought the dealerships twice over if I chose. But I saw the fear in his face, the way the pressure had already worn him down. My mother watched from across the room with quiet triumph, already turning to Damian and Elena to smooth things over. My father looked away. My older sister whispered something to Abigail that made them both smile. In that moment, I understood the painful choice staring back at me. I could keep fighting, drag this into public war, maybe even save the company, or force accountability. But it would destroy Ryan completely, and I would still be tied to people who saw me as a tool. Or I could walk away right now with my dignity and my truth, knowing I had exposed their character exactly as my grandmother taught me. The cost was everything the man I loved, the family I had tried so hard to believe in, and any illusion that blood meant loyalty. I looked at Uncle Paul and Cousin Zoe, the only ones who had stood with me. "Thank you," I said softly. Then I turned to my mother one last time. "You showed me exactly who you are when you thought I had nothing left to give. And now I know I don't need any of it." I walked out of the lounge without another word, the night air hitting my face like a fresh start and a final goodbye all at once. The weeks that followed were quieter than I expected. Ryan called once to say he had taken a transfer out of state to escape the whispers my sister started. He wished me well, but the distance in his voice said the damage was permanent. The dealerships survived the scandal because the Langs still needed the network, and my family closed ranks, painting me as the unstable daughter who had exaggerated everything. Elena Vargas quietly confirmed the investigation would stall without my full cooperation, and I chose not to give it. Some battles aren't worth the war when the people you're fighting for have already walked away. I kept my modest apartment, my old Subaru, and the simple life my grandmother had shown me was enough. But the loneliness settled in deeper than I thought it would. Family dinners became memories I no longer attended. Calls went unanswered. I had chosen myself, chosen the truth, but the price was a silence that echoed louder than any argument. My mother never apologized. My father never explained. My older sister still posts pictures of the thriving business like nothing happened. Looking back now, I realize the hardest part wasn't the betrayal. It was learning that sometimes exposing the truth doesn't change the people who built their lives on lies. It only frees you to walk away from them. And walking away, even when it leaves you standing alone, is still the only choice that lets you keep your own character intact. Thank you for listening to my story. If you've ever had to choose between family loyalty and your own worth, I'd love to hear how it turned out for you in the comments.